I came back totally energized from Thessaloniki. I'm making a dish today called Poyo con Prunes. It's actually Ladino for chicken with prunes. Get a little bit of olive oil in there. I just want to pat down the chicken a little bit so that it doesn't splatter. It'll brown more easily that way and be a little crispy. The dish has all of the spices that, to my mind, speak Eastern Mediterranean. Things like cinnamon, coriander seed, red wine, tomatoes. I'm just gonna let the chicken work and brown. While that's happening, I'm gonna cut the onions into fairly thick rings. And that's one of the things I really like about this dish, the texture. The prunes are whole, except for a few. The tomatoes are nice and chunky. And the onions, you can really feel them. This is exactly the kind of color we want on the chicken. This recipe I find really interesting because the use of prunes is also something that you find in all Greek cooking, especially in the north. It's a mix of influences. It's what came with the Jews in the 15th century from Spain and then kind of intertwined with what was already here. The chicken is browned enough now to come out. And we're gonna make the sauce before adding the chicken back to the pot. I just want to season the chicken a little bit while it's still hot. And I'm using a nice flaky Greek sea salt for that. And a little bit of black pepper. And we're gonna get the onions in here next. I always like to scrape up whatever bits of skin might have stuck to the bottom of the pan because it's flavorful. While the onions continue to soften up a little bit, I'm gonna get the coriander ready, and I'm using coriander seed. That's really common in Greek cooking. And I just wanna get this crushed a little bit. I love to do it by hand. I want kind of a coarse grind on it, so I'm gonna show you what that should look like. Can you see? Looks like the onions are just about where we want them, nice and soft. A little bit of color on them, but still intact. A little bit of garlic goes in next. Just giving that a swirl. Now at this point, I like to add the spices, a little bit of cayenne, a little bit of cinnamon, those coriander seeds. The reason I like to add the spices at this point, because when you add them to the warm olive oil, all of their own essential oils have a chance to blossom. You get more aroma, more flavor that way. I'm gonna add a couple of prunes to this at this point and just mash them before adding the prunes whole. Tomato paste goes in next. I like to add that before the liquid. It helps thicken the sauce even at this point. You get more flavor when you cook it a little bit with olive oil. A little bit of dry red wine. As soon as that deglazes, I'll add the rest of the liquid to this, a little bit of chicken broth and our tomatoes. Prunes have a lot of pectin, so the longer they cook, the thicker the sauce, and that's kind of an important element in this dish. Let me season that with a bit of salt and pepper. And a little bit of cinnamon stick. This now has to cook down for about 15 or 20 minutes. We want the sauce to be fairly thick before we add the chicken back to it. What I love about this dish is that kind of the whole history of Thessaloniki is in here in a way. This idea of a tomato sauce with cinnamon is very Greek. The prunes are kind of something you find in different rich meat dishes all over the country, especially in the north. The spice, that cayenne, is total Thessaloniki. Thessaloniki is a crossroads, and the crossroads have met in this dish. I'm gonna get the chicken back in the pan. And I'm just gonna turn this over a little bit so that it's all nice and sauced up. It smells really good. Now we're going to cover the pan and let that cook now for about 40 minutes or so until the chicken is really tender and all these beautiful flavors are all melded together. And then we're going to enjoy that with a little bit of Greek wine together. All right, it's time to reveal the Poyo con Prunes. I wish you were here to smell this with me. It smells amazing. I'm going to get some of this served. Let me get a little sauce around here. Remember I talked about the chunky sauce, and that's exactly what's happening here. It looks really good. The smells so aromatic. I can't wait to dig into it. Cut a little piece of the drumstick and get a little prune in there too. Sweet and spicy. I'm getting that great cayenne. I'm getting the beautiful sweetness of the prunes and of the onions that have been cooking for such a long time. Today I'm serving this with a wine called Agiorghitiko, and it's from a wine region very close to Athens, actually, about an hour and a half south, called Nemea. It's one of the oldest appellations in the world, one of the oldest wine-producing regions in Greece. It's a nice, medium-bodied, dry red wine. It goes beautifully with these luscious, spicy flavors. This really is, to my mind, the taste of Thessaloniki and the taste of Sephardic Jewish cooking.